Obviously, we're all in lockdown at the moment. Are you missing the football just as much as the rest of us?
Well, I think I miss football, of course. I mean, because that is a part of our passion. But having said that, I think that in this time, and it's so important that football shows what we really are. And on one hand, that we have to take responsibility for the society around us. I see a lot of clubs are doing that. I like that. On the other hand, it's also show the importance of football, because we know when we get together again, to get people on the ground, that will probably take some months before we can do that. But still, that will be the great symbol of things our society is working again.
I think it's been a really good opportunity to look back at some of our favourite football moments as well, which brings us on nicely to speaking to you today. Your memories of joining Middlesbrough.
No, well, it was like when I played in England for like 6 years or something, and I swapped some clubs, and I just had that principle when clubs agreed a fee, it was time to move on. And when Swindon Town told me that they have agreed a fee with Middlesbrough, it was time to speak to them. And I mean, it's an easy world. When Brian Robson called you, you say yes before you comes to Robson, or Brian Raw, yeah, and you say yes, and you don't think of any fees or anything. And in my head, of course, at the time, I scored a lot of goals in the championship. I played against Middlesbrough, and we were like sliding down the tables at Swindon, and we saw Middlesbrough had a great chance to come up to the Premiership. And I thought maybe if I moved on, that would be to a Premiership club. But when I talked to Middlesbrough and I saw the potential, Viv Anderson and Brian Robson, we met at some hotel, and they brought a lot of photos of the new Riverside Stadium. The buggers, they did it well. A good sell-in for me. And you saw you wanted to be a part of that. And a lot of people talking about that revolution at Middlesbrough that I guess started when Brian Robson came there. That was a big sign of the club, getting the Manchester United captain up there. Steve Gibson did ever so good and take him there. And I felt very flattered that at that time they wanted me to be one of the first one who came there as one of the like the frontliner, and I've scored a lot of goals in the championship, and I hope that can contribute to take that next step to the Premier League.
Yeah, because obviously you'd played in the Premier League with Swindon already, and the pressure, I suppose, for us that season for Middlesbrough was that it was the last season at Ayresome Park, and we really wanted to go out on a high note. Did that add a bit of pressure to get promotion that season?
Yeah, I think we did, but sometimes you do calculations, you do an analysis of how big is the chance. At the end of my career in England, I went to Barnsley, and I knew there would be hard. Then after Middlesbrough, I went to Sheffield United and then to Barnsley. But then also the analysis was, well, I'm 31. This is a great chance to have another shot in the Premiership. But with Middlesbrough, I had to take the analysis, how likely was it for the club to go up. When I saw the setup, and I called some friends, obviously with Brian Robson and the people in and around the club, with the chairman, the analysis just came out that you saw that there was a big chance that you will go up. And there were 8 or 9 games left. I had a look at the schedule and everything, but still, they had me by hello, because I felt like any human being, when they ask you to be a part of a project, a part of a big plan, you feel very flattered to be a part of that. And I think that's what it made it easy for me to go up north.
Obviously, the Riverside, as you say, was the long-term project, but just that final season at Ayresome, for fans like, well, including myself, who never got to experience that atmosphere, what was Ayresome Park like as a stadium? Because it had its own qualities, obviously, and an own character.
I guess the new generation of football fans, they are used to the modern stadium, and Ayresome Park was one of these iconic stadiums where you have the long black corridors that you couldn't even see people go around. There are some of them left, maybe Fulham and some of these clubs still got them, but now more or less modern stadiums all over the world. But Ayresome Park was great to come to, and there was a funny thing when I should be presented as a new player. And growing up, when I was a kid, I'm born in '67. So when I started reading tables, Leeds was the big team. So when I was a kid, then I followed Leeds United. And when Gordon McQueen and Joe Jordan were sold to Manchester United, I was crying. I was actually crying. I had tears in my eyes when they left, like in '77. I was 10. So I come to Ayresome Park, and I've heard a lot about the stadium, and I came into these black corridors, and the first one I meet in the corridor is Gordon McQueen. So Gordon McQueen being the reserve coach of Middlesbrough, I didn't know that. And when I came in there, I saw Gordon McQueen. I was a record signing. I went down on my knees in one of those corridors and did like one of them. Yeah, it's Gordon McQueen, and it was unbelievable. And I'm very happy that I was able to play also at Ayresome Park, and I managed to score the first goal, the first game, the second goal of the first game at Riverside, and I had a big chance at Ayresome Park at the last game, and that would have probably been a quiz for the rest of our lives, who scored in the last game at Ayresome Park. But it wasn't to be, but I was happy that I was able to score my first goal for Boro there, and it was a great experience to experience that before we went into the wonderful Riverside Stadium that I passed going to training every day, and I saw the building kind of rise up.
Yeah, because you, as you said, unfortunately didn't score in the last game at Ayresome Park, but you made a massive contribution in terms of the goals. I think you scored in 3 of the last 4, and that was the only one that you didn't. The one that sticks in my mind was a goal at Barnsley, where you look at the video back and it's pouring with rain. There's thousands of Boro fans in the open end, and they're just going bonkers. And obviously that iconic celebration, the airplane celebration. Where did that celebration come from? Was that something that you had always done throughout your career?
No, I would love to say I had that, but I was one of those goal getters that I was looking for my celebration. I did everything, and I had the Cantona thing. I had a Lee Sharp doing Elvis thing. I did everything, and I've always promised a friend of mine in Norway, because he always said to me, Jan, remember I did it first in the Norwegian league. Yes, he did. But when I came to England, it was one game at County Ground. I did the airplane celebration. Careca, who played for Napoli with Maradona, had some sort of that, but I kind of went them into the Norwegian Airlines. And so after the first half, and when I scored a goal, there was an old lady with no teeth, and she was probably 85, at least is good for the story. She was at least old. And she said, Jan. And I turned around, and she was doing the airplane, and she was doing, I thought, well, it's good enough for her, it's good enough for me. And from then on, I always used it in England. And it's quite interesting, because that goal in Barnsley is when I talk to a lot of Boro fans, somehow that has been stuck. And I think that is basically because at the time Barnsley was doing their ground, so it was like behind the goal. You saw that they were constructing, like you saying, the rain was pouring down. We had that green iconic shirt, brilliant shirt, by the way, a color never been seen before, never been seen after. And yeah, I think there was a pleasure as well. And I've seen that goal. It was a good goal. And you can also see it in my face, that relief that we got a point there. Because I remember later that I played for Barnsley, and the dressing room at Barnsley, and I think with all due respect to Barnsley, I would say that those dressing rooms were awful at the time. And when we were sitting in the bath, because we got a point there, I remember Viv Anderson played. He must have been like 69 at the time. And we were playing, and then we saw that the result came in from the other championship games, and we saw that point was so vital. So, and I think it is also for Middlesbrough fans. I mean, that was a symbol of where we were going from and what we were going to. And we at the time then went from a Barnsley stadium, and that at that time was a construction area, into Anfield, Old Trafford, and so on. So yeah, it's a great goal.
Just going back to the last game at Ayresome Park, obviously a carnival atmosphere and the perfect ending, the perfect send-off for such an old and historic stadium.
Yeah, it was, and you felt you were part of something, and not only that, we were going into Riverside, we would go out of that Ayresome Park with all the history. And I'm one of them. I love my history. I love my political history. I love my history in football. And of course, I knew the history of Middlesbrough. I know the proud players who have played there over the years, with Brian Clough, Mannion, and all these kind of legends. And I think one of the reasons I, as a foreigner, always adjusted quite quick just to the countries I came to, and also the clubs, that, well, I played for a lot of clubs in my career, but I can 100% honestly say that it took me, I had a plan always when I came to a club. I wanted to be a part of the history of this club, try to play my little part. And at that time, we understood this was big, and we saw mostly the elderly fans in the stand. Okay, they were so happy going to Riverside, this modern stadium, but still that meant so much to them. They've been there for, it's not a cliche, they've been there for all their life. And I think they saw that, and I think we as players, we felt proud to be a part of that history.
Yeah, and obviously going into the new stadium, what was that like? Was it, because I mean that was one of the first all-seater stadiums that was built after the, obviously the Taylor Report, etc., etc., and it must have just felt like a different world.
Yeah, it was, and it was funny because I saw an article. They say Jan Fjortoft, the guy who lived in a castle, because I lived for 6-7 months in Wilton Castle. At that time, was the head office for one of our sponsors. And every morning when I went to Esom or somewhere, wherever we trained, I mean, we trained all over the place there, didn't we? And when I went there, I always saw something new at Riverside. And I can still remember that, I think on a Friday before we played Chelsea, we were going up to the players and we had a look at the stadium. We couldn't believe that this is going to be finished the day after. There were like all kind of people hanging around to do the last work, but it was fantastic. And I think it's also great that we, in that first game, played one of the big teams in England. We played Chelsea, mighty Chelsea, with great players in their team. And I think that kind of meant that we were with the big boys, quite literally with the big boys. And winning there was like amazing. And that crowd at the time, I mean, I still got it in my ears. I mean, that passion the Boro fans had at that time was like unbelievable.
And as you said about, you know, making your small part in a club's history, a big part, you scored the first ever game at the Riverside, albeit not the first goal, but a massive moment for the club nonetheless.
Yeah, I got the Buzz Aldrin goal. I mean, after Armstrong being on the moon. But having said that, I would love to have the first goal, as you say. But it was also fair that Craig Hignett got it, because he was a good Boro lad. He's still a Boro lad. He's still in the area. So I'm very happy for him. But yes, as you said, I was fortunate to score that second goal, a good volley set up by Nick Barmby, and myself and Craig Hignett and Nicky. We had a good understanding to each other, and that was just a great day, and it was a great start for us in the Premiership. And yeah, it's one to tell the children and the grandchildren.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was your full season with Middlesbrough, obviously 1995 to 96. We had a great team. You mentioned about Craig Hignett, Nick Barmby there, the midget gems, as the Middlesbrough fans call them. We had a really good team, and the start. I mean, I think there was one point where we were fourth in the league in the autumn time. So, you know, a fantastic team, and it must have been a pleasure to play with players like that up front in Middlesbrough.
Absolutely, and it was interesting because it was more or less the same team that we had in the Championship, and there was a great team atmosphere. There was a great inspiration. There was a great joy of playing in that team, and I think that we kind of took that team feel, that way of being in the stadium, new stadium with the fans, and I think we were as excited as the fans traveling around England and play against the great English teams, and yeah, so I think that was the best time when I was there. That team feeling was we were together, or that project, and then. And football is funny, isn't it? I mean, then later when we got Juninho, and Juninho came in, and he's by far the best players I've ever played with. And he came into the team. We got more or less better players into the team, but maybe we lacked then a bit of that collective thing that we kind of, the balance in the team weren't the same. But still, the first season was decent. As you said, we were up there early doors, and then. I mean, quality. I mean, you got exposed for lack of quality in some games. That's what you do when you go from Championship to play with the best teams in the world. But still, it was a hell of a season.
Yeah, you mentioned Juninho there. I think he knew that I was going to ask him about him at some point, because obviously, I would say far and away that the Middlesbrough fans' favourite player. When he came in, we mentioned about going from Ersson to the Riverside, bringing in a player like Juninho. Was that another moment where you thought, wow, this is just taking things to a different level?
Well, as I lived in my castle, I came home one day, and there was a security guy down at the road going up to Wilton Castle. He said, "You can't go up here. There is a presentation." And I said, "Who?" "There is something, a presentation, and I can't tell you what." I said, "I live here." And he said, "No, nobody lives at this castle." "Well, I do." And then he wanted to stop me, and I said, "Yeah." And then I said a word, and then I just more or less drove over him, and I went up, and I parked at my place, and I And I saw Boro cars here, and I was thinking, what's going on here? And then I went into this big room, and there was the biggest table in the world, this table like you see in films, in castles. And just on top of that table, you had Brian Robson, Viv Anderson, Keith Lamb, and the rest of the boys. And then I saw this little boy sitting there. Looked like it could be my son, and my son was 4 at the time, by the way, or 3, 4. So I went up to him and said, "Hello, my name is Jan. I'll see you in training tomorrow." And that was the first time I saw Juninho. So now I always make joke of that, because there was I think it was Schwarzer who the other day had a podcast with Juninho and asked for questions. We would tell Juninho, and I said, just ask him how fortunate it was that a great player made his debut so great, with making that pass from him so great that I scored in that game. But I mean, that was a part of it, and that Leeds game was unbelievable. And Juninho, from first training, from first game, he was just unbelievable. And he was a magician, and I can't find another word. He could take on, he can dribble 5 in training and score, and he did the same in the Premiership. And I think that goal that we scored against Leeds United, that was Juninho at his best, because he took people on, and still he managed to keep up the speed and still have the vision where to play the pass. And yeah, he was just unbelievable to play with. And it was, we were lucky to follow his career, being a World Cup winner and everything. And then he probably came back to Middlesbrough like 16 times in his career and did great there. So he's a symbol of a great time at Middlesbrough, and not the worst symbol a club can have.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, it's a good job he scored that goal, though. Otherwise, he wouldn't have quite had the same debut.
Exactly, my point.
And obviously, going into 96, 97, that's when things really started going a bit crazy for Middlesbrough. You know, we were bringing in Emerson, Mikel Beck came in, Fabrizio Ravanelli. Obviously, you're as a forward player, you must be thinking, fantastic, brilliant players. But at the same time, you know, I'm going to have to fight really hard to get my spot in this team, because these are world-class players.
Well, they were okay, but Ravanelli came as a Champions League winner. Mikel Beck was up to that. And the funny thing is, like Ravanelli and Mikel Beck, I still keep a lot of touch with them. And but when Ravanelli came as a Champions League winner, Mikel Beck came as one of the promising striker of Europe, being a candidate for the Danish national team at the time. I had to say, like Lady Diana, it was a bit crowded up there. So I, of course, knew that the chance it would be hard to get chances. That is the downside of being a part of a project, because, you know, and I scored only 7 goals in the Premiership the first season, and then you just knew that they will look for another striker. Then Ravanelli came in. He scored. He was my roommate, by the way. We lived just nearby village, and well, I came along with him very good from the start. And Ravanelli he was a funny lad, and Brian Robson was quite wise, I think, that he put me in room with him. But first of all, I was probably more international, being a foreigner, playing in Austria and being a bit around the world also with the national team. And it was funny because Ravanelli didn't want to learn any English. And the players were like, they were very shy to ask him any questions. So when they would have a conversation with him, me and Ravanelli, we made a language based of German, English, Norwegian, Latin, Italy, Spanish. So somehow we found a language. But all the other players, the British players, they always just dare to say, so where are you from? And Ravanelli always said Perugia. So till Curtis Fleming one day, we were in the steam bar at Spring Health Club after a game, and Curtis Fleming thought, well, I'm sweating, I have to get out. And Ravanelli, of course, had the most expensive, the biggest watch in the history of football. And Curtis Fleming just asked him, what time is it, Rav? And Rav turned around and said, Perugia. So they kind of summed up the whole. And I remember the funniest story I have with Ravanelli, because Rav was a special guy, and he was used to just walk away from restaurants, bill and everything. He said, no problem, Bill will send to Boro, no problem. So I always ending up paying all his bills. But we were playing Aston Villa away, and we had a team meeting, and next to me, right to me, was sitting his translator, who was always also his agent. I think that was Paldini or something his name was. And then Ravanelli was sitting there. So Brian Robson says, so this is how we're going to play. Up front, I want you, Rav, to go into the space, and and they have one defender, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do that. And then Brian Robson says, look at him and say, is that okay, Rav? And then Palladini would go, and so he's translating in the team meeting, and Ravanelli goes into a rant. And I mean, you don't have to understand Italian to understand that he thought that the tactic was a catastrophe, because catastrophe was mentioned 3 or 4 times. And he was like, well, and so when he was finished, Paldini, the translator, looked at Robson and said, yes, it's okay. And I mean, that kind of summed up the Boro team at that time. I was charming and still a bit sad that we didn't manage to keep that team spirit, team feeling up.
Yeah, obviously, so you would go on to leave the club, I believe, over the winter the next year, but in your final game, scored a crucial goal in the FA Cup, and obviously, again, part of our club's history, because that run was our first run to the FA Cup final.
Exactly, and I think that is a recipe how you're going to leave a club. You should come on, score a goal, you should run to the middle of the park, turn around your shirt, and as you see, I have my shirt on, turn that around, point at Fjortoft at your back and do like this, point to Robson in the stand, and 3 days later I was sold. So no, it was it was a time that I had to play games, and whatever club you're at, you want to play there. Of course, there was a run in the cups, but still it was still crowded up front there. So it was time to leave, and when Sheffield United came in, that was good for me, because I had to play football. I was desperate to play football, and so then I start commuting and just still follow them and still work with televisions for the cup runs, which was amazing. But it was an amazing times in the terms of the people we brought in. I mean, you brought in Sergei Branco, that was probably 52, and he told everybody he was 31, and one in a bus. So we were sitting in a bus after training, and I said, Branco, look at me straight in my eyes and tell me, quite honestly, how old are you? I mean, tell me, I want to know now, how old are you? Because I know you won the World Cup for Brazil in 1958. So please just tell me how old you are. And then he looked at me and said, I am 31. And I said, no, I won't have that. And so he was there. And then you had Emerson, who kind of commuted to Brazil for times, going forward and back and playing games. So there was a kind of, and then you had the British lads who were quite honest in their approach to the game, and it must have been hard to be a manager for such international, completely out of order at times club.
I think that's probably sums up the way the fans remember it as, a bonkers season, a crazy season, ultimately heartbreaking, but some of the best memories that you could possibly have as a fan. And obviously, you made your point to Brian Robson, but unfortunately, it was the end of your time with Middlesbrough. But I think you shared on social media a couple of days ago a letter that you received from Steve Gibson, which shows just how fondly you remembered by the club and, I suppose, by the fans as well.
Yeah, I had a fantastic time at Middlesbrough, and like you said, I'm so proud to have a little part in a great history of a club. And when I can look back at my career, sometimes I would love to play for one of the biggest club, but still I was lucky to play in different clubs when they had their best time, and I think that at that time, and I was so happy for Boro when they then finally got a title with Gareth and Steve Gibson as well, and I think that it speaks so much for Steve Gibson. He's still around, still with his passion, and I read his interviews, and when I got a letter, I still got it. I got great memories from that stadium. I also had a dad who worked in oil always, and he came back later, and his boat, his supply ship, was repaired in Middlesbrough all time at the riverside, and he went up to see the old people, and it was good to be around. And it's easy for me in Germany, because in Germany I got only one club to follow. In England I got 4, so I'm always careful by seeing it. So that people ask me, what was the best place you've been? And I always say, if I had a lot of girls, because I've been married like for 200 years. But if I had, I will never kind of compare them. But I was very fortunate to be at Middlesbrough at that time, and not only imagine the passion that was up in Northeast, when you have Middlesbrough, Sunderland and Newcastle all in that small circle, and that passionate at that time. And I just hope and beg that Boro can one day get back there, because with the history, with the passion and with the fans there, they got all the potential to be one of the better clubs in England. So we just have all fingers crossed.
Yeah, you and me both, Jan, definitely. I think it speaks volumes for you that you can have 4 different clubs in England and them all remember you fondly, because I don't think that happens for very many footballers. It's a test of our character as well. But listen, Jan, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. So I really do appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Well, pleasure to be on, and I just want to say all the best wishes to everybody. Stay calm, look after yourself. Yes, football is important, but we know that day when we'll be back at the Riverside supporting Middlesbrough, that will be a fantastic day. And for every day, it's one day closer to normality. So just stay safe, and we'll see you soon.